Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lock-Cast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on social media at MMALOTN. This week we're going over a big UFC 280 pay-per-view card taking place in Abu Dhabi. In the main event, we got the lightweight title on the line as Charles Oliveira is looking to recapture the gold after getting it stripped from him due to missing weight in his last fight. He's going up against his toughest test to date in Islam Makhachev, the pupil of the famed Khabib Nurmagomedov. Very much looking forward to seeing how that fight shakes out from a stylistic perspective as well as a betting perspective as well, which I'll obviously be breaking down for you guys later in this podcast. In the co-main event, we got the bantamweight title on the line as Aljamain Sterling looks to defend his title against former bantamweight king TJ Dillashaw. So a very interesting stylistic matchup there as well. But this card has straight fire throughout it. The fight before that, we got Petrosyan going up against Chookagian O'Malley, Mateusz Gamrot going up against Beneil Dariush, and starting off the main card, we have a very pivotal women's flyweight bout between number one ranked Chookagian taking on rising prospect Manon Fiorot. Should give us a very entertaining fight. Not to mention another pivotal matchup in the men's welterweight division as Belal Muhammad takes on another rising prospect and undefeated fighter Sean Brady. So you're going to be wanting to tune in to the entirety of this pay-per-view and the prelims because every single fight has a lot of fire on it as well. And just a reminder for you guys, 10 a.m. Eastern is the start time for this card. So it's going to be nice and early, especially if you're on the West Coast. It'll be a 7 a.m. Pacific start time. But I know a lot of people that are jacked up for coffee and combat. And that's exactly what I'm going to be as well. Not to mention, it is my birthday that day. So I'll be getting crunk nice and early with you guys. And keywords there with you guys because I'll also be doing a birthday watch party live on this channel. As soon as the fights kick off, I'm going to be getting crunk with you guys, drinking, burning, whatever it is for 6 straight hours. So make sure you guys join me for that. Come on through. Hit that like and subscribe below and then hit the bell notification so you know exactly when I'm going to be going live. Not just for that, but I got a ton of other great content that I drop on this channel. So there's your reminder for that. All right, before we get into the breakdowns, let's do the transparency part of this podcast, which is always going over the last picks, the last bets from the last event. Because win, lose, or draw, we always showcase how we're doing. And lately, your boy's been killing it. I mean, we're on a 10-1 winning streak over the last 11 UFC events or Dana White Contender Series events as well. That's obviously chunked in there. The only loss was that 1-unit loss that we had on the Contender Series on Heater Jacoby, but it's been straight fire otherwise. All right, so the last event was the UFC Vegas 62 card. Lock of the night play, we'll start off with that, was the main event. Alexa Grasso goes out there and clean sweeps on 2 of the judges' scorecards, I believe. She wins that fight pretty handily against Viviane Araújo. 5 units at minus 200 cashes us for plus 2.5 units. So lock of the night play hits. Very happy about that. And a solid underdog play as well. 1 unit at plus 130 on Jacob Malkoun comes through as well. I believe there was some sort of injury for Nick Maximov. However, even if he didn't have the injury, I think we'll see Malkoun go out there and do exactly what he would have done. So please keep giving me Jacob Malkoun at underdog odds, and I'll be hopefully cashing him more often than not. All right, we only had L's after that. We had 3 L's as well, so let's go over that as well. Minus 1 unit at plus 180 on Misha Cirkunov. Bad bet there. I really thought he'd be able to handle that early onslaught, drag the fight to the ground, and get his jiu-jitsu going. He didn't even get close, and I'm not going to be that guy chirping over here saying that I got value on the plus 180. I didn't. It sucked. Misha Cirkunov washed. Never trust him again, and he likely won't even be in the UFC any further as well because I think he's on a 5-fight losing streak at this point in time, so not a good look. Also, we took a 1-unit loss in the co-main event with Cub Swanson. I had 1 unit at plus 177. It might be up for him as well. Wasn't really reacting well to the leg kicks of Jonathan Martinez. And Martinez went out there and got his 3rd finish inside the UFC. To get finished by Jonathan Martinez is a big red flag, and I think that Cub Swanson will forever be blacklisted for me as well. But solid shout out to anybody that took the chalk on the Lonzo Menafield and Jonathan Martinez sides. Y'all cashed with relative ease, so good shit to you guys. And then lastly, the reason why I try to stay away from parlays and the reason I don't make parlays my lock of the night plays anymore is perfect example because shit like this could happen. Victor Henry goes out there and gets absolutely wiped by a Rafael Assunção over 15 minutes. Beautiful counter striking from Assunção, even though he was on his back foot for the majority of that fight. He was really connecting well on Victor Henry, hurting him on numerous occasions. And then even the other leg ended up flopping as well, which was the under 1.5 in the Dushko Todorovic and Jordan Wright fight. Didn't look good. It did not look good, especially with how slow and the fact that both guys were looking for grappling right off the jump. And I believe it didn't end up cashing because it went 1 minute past or 2 minutes past the under 1.5 round mark. So all in all, minus 1.21 units on that parlay. And as an overall from that card, plus 0.59 units. So only a 6% ROI that night. Again, happy to end up in the green. Happy that my overconfidence, I don't even want to call it overconfidence, my bundles of confidence on Alexa Grasso allowed me to pull the trigger at 5 units there so that we still ended up on the profit side of that fight. So like I said, we've hit now 10 out of our last 11 events. I believe it's for a profit of 24 units. I could be off on that, but for a 33% ROI. So I'm very happy with the streak that I'm on, especially even dating back to April. Have been absolutely killing it since then as well and hope to continue the good times. And if you want to be a supporter of the good times, the best way to do so is make sure you guys hit up the Patreon. Link is in the description below. You guys get my picks as soon as I drop them. The best bets and props article also goes over every single matchup on the card. I give my best bet, my best prop, the best hedge opportunity as well in case you're too confident on one side, as well as a quick live betting synopsis of what you should be thinking going into each fight if you want to bet it from a live betting perspective. A great Discord community as well. And something that I'll be doing this week, as I've been doing for every pay-per-view event pretty much, is the pay-per-view parlay for the patrons, which is pretty much I put out a survey out there and I allow all the patrons to pick their 4 favorite legs on this card that's money lined or over unders. And whatever the 4 most popular spots are at the end of the week, I'll be putting 5% of my Patreon take on that parlay. Should that parlay hit, I send off the winnings to one random Patreon member. So if you want to be a part of that, make sure you guys sign up to the Patreon. Link in the description below. There you guys go. And it's not just for the picks. It's for the support of dropping content nearly every single day for you guys as well. At a measly $5 a month, you guys continue to allow me to do this on a full-time basis. And for that, I will forever be grateful and will always try to put out the highest quality and most accurate breakdowns that I can always drop for you guys. So there you guys go. All right. Let's not waste any more time. We got 13 fights to get through, first of which goes down in the women's bantamweight division. We got minus 295 on Karol Rosa and plus 245 to return on the 40-year-old Lina Lansberg. Now, I wish I got to tape a little bit earlier on this matchup. It looks like I've got something caught in my eye real quick, right off the jump. What a great way to start the podcast. But with Lina Lansberg here, 40 years old, coming in against this prospect in Karol Rosa, who's coming off a loss, her first loss in the UFC. She dropped the ball against Sarah McMahon, but Lina Lansberg hoping to take that heat from Karol Rosa and try to make one last run to the top of the division. Unfortunately, I just think it's a little bit too late, and I think that was on full display in her last fight against Pani Kianzad, who I think is not as good as Karol Rosa, if I'm being honest. We saw Pani Kianzad just absolutely beat Lina Lansberg to the punch there, had great output, had some great work in the clinch. She got dropped one time, but she managed to recover very well, get back into the fight, and then start to take over once again. She gets her hand raised via decision that night. Karol Rosa should be able to do the same thing, if not more effectively. She has great output. On numerous occasions, she's landed over 100 significant strikes. She stays very active with her jab. She throws her 1-2 very well. She has mean body work when she's inside the clinch as well. And I think that that's where Lina Lansberg thrives, right? I think that when she can get into the clinch, she uses her elbows and knees very effectively. But I think the power that she's going to be feeling from Karol Rosa here will start to deter Lina Lansberg the longer that this fight goes as well. So I also wouldn't even be surprised to see Rosa try to to take a grapple-heavy approach, look to take Lansberg to the ground and just nullify that elbow game that she has. And from there, she should be able to do good work from on top. I think Rosa is a very solid prospect. She trains at the same gym that Jessica Andrade has been famous for. I believe it's called PR Valetudo. I can't recall what the PR means, but it's PRVT, but it's one of the better known gyms in Brazil, especially for women's MMA. They got a handful of women coming out of that gym that can compete at a very high level, and Carol Rosa is the next one of them, who I think could absolutely get up there and make it into the top 10, the top 5, and possibly get a title shot in the next couple of years. So I think that this is a great matchup for Rosa to go out there. I think the chalk is more than worthy of it as well. If I got to tape on this a little bit earlier, I probably would have made her my lock of the night play at minus 225. Minus 295, it's getting closer to, let's look if we can parlay this with something else on the card and possibly get a better line on it. Again, I don't mind playing the minus 300 chalk straight up, but I know to the layman, they don't really want to be paying that kind of chalk. They want a little bit of a bigger payoff for any bet that they make, so I completely understand that. But I do like Carol Rosa here, and I think she wins this fight via decision, which at minus 115, not a bad spot either. All right, let's get to the next fight here. We're going to be talking about Muhammad Mokaev going up against Canadian Malcolm Gordon, minus 850 on Mokaev. He might as well be minus 1850 going up against Malcolm Gordon at plus 600. Mokaev had a tougher test than people were expecting him to have last time around against Charles Johnson. However, his relentless wrestling style and his cardio, which was showing off that fight, really paid off for him. He was able to get down Johnson on numerous occasions, and even though Johnson was doing a good job in terms of nullifying the success that Mokaev was having from on top, he just could not stop that relentless pace. That is what Mokaev looks like at his best, right? Gets his grappling going, gets his opponents to the ground, smashes them from on top, looks for a submission, whatever it may be, or in the case of his Charles Johnson fight, looking to just grind him out. That was a big question mark going into the Johnson fight because we knew Johnson could likely keep up with him, but could he get off his own offense and his own damage to even get the judges to think about judging the fight in his favor? But he could not get anything going. On the Malcolm Gordon side, he got that Dennis Bonder injury win earlier this year. It's a good win for him there. He got to defeat Francisco Figueiredo. Solid win for him there. But I think that we will see him go back to being that guy that a lot of people expect to just be a walkover. And given the fact that he's taken this fight against Mokaev, especially on that side of the world, we have to give him credit. A lot of people would expect him to kind of look for a different path, especially on a 2-fight winning streak, try to get an easier matchup. But Mokaev, very, very difficult matchup for him. Gordon, his wrestling, his grappling, probably the better part of his game, but I think he's going to be outdone in both aspects of that of the MMA game should he look to take this fight to the ground. Mokaev will be grappling him, and I think he is safe enough with his jiu-jitsu that he won't get caught with anything by Gordon. And then on the ground, I think Mokaev can pass when he needs to, get to the dominant position when he needs to, and just TKO Malcolm Gordon from on top. So the over-under is even set at 1.5, with the under being minus 105, at least at the time of this recording. I think, that's probably going to take some steam come fight time, but I do think that Mokaev will go out there and run through Malcolm Gordon relatively easy in this fight. So Mokaev inside the distance, minus 200, I think it's worthy of it, honestly. I would rather parlay that than parlay as minus 850. And the last thing I'll say about this matchup, if you took Mokaev inside the distance against Charles Johnson and now you don't trust him to win fights inside the distance, your priorities are all messed up there. Charles Johnson, much better, much more durable, and much more resilient than what Malcolm Gordon is going to be bringing to the table this weekend. So go ahead, take Mokaev inside the distance. I think you'll be cashing that ticket regardless. All right, next matchup, we got a middleweight fight here. Very excited about this Striker's Delight. We got Armen Petrosyan coming in as a minus 205 our favorite, and AJ Dobson coming in as a plus 175 underdog. Now, starting off the AJ Dobson side, he had a very successful stint on the Contender Series where he was able to finish his opponent with about 30 seconds left in that first round. I believe it was via rear naked choke, but his opponent missed weight pretty bad that night, or the day before that, and it looked like it was wearing on him in the fight as well. But a lot of success from AJ Dobson on his regional scene came from getting his opponents out of there ASAP. He has big power in his hands, and he has a decent enough jiu-jitsu game to hang with the guys that he was fighting on the regional scene. But his wrestling, defensively speaking, looked very good in that first round against Jacob Malkoun. But then that pressure and that pace that we saw from Malkoun this past weekend was alive and well in that fight against AJ Dobson a couple of months ago, and that's why we saw Malkoun get the win the way that he did. But this one, if there is grappling, I think we'll see it from the Dobson side. I just don't think that we'll see him be super effective with it. We've seen Petrosyan get taken down time and time again over his last several fights, but he does a good job in terms of being really good with his submission defense. So I'd be surprised if we see Dobson lock up any sort of submission. And then in terms of getting back to his feet, he does a very good job with that as well. And I think once this fight is on the feet, yes, you got to respect Dobson's punching power and the ability to starch opponents. But I think that Petrosyan is the better technical striker here, and he should be the one that will land the better shots and eventually find that chin and get AJ Dobson out of there. So the spot that I like the most is probably the under 2.5, which I'm expecting to be chalky anywhere around that minus 180 to minus 200 range. But I think I would rather take the under 2.5 than actually take Petrosyan here on his money line, because I'm expecting him to go out there and get the finish regardless. At least with the under 2.5, you can bank on, getting bailed out in case Dobson is the one that lands the big punch to put Petrosyan down and out. So I'm going to go Petrosyan, though, because I do think he is the better fighter. I think he has better credentials, especially when it comes to the kickboxing realm. And then with his power and his speed, I think he's going to be able to get the better of Dobson probably within 10 minutes, within the first 2 rounds. I think he should be able to find that chin of Dobson and put him out. So Armen Petrosyan inside the distance, that's minus 105. I'm completely okay with that, but I think we'll see a round of feeling each other out, and then Petrosyan should really start to let it go in the second round, and then from there he should be able to get his hand raised. All right, next up, we got a welterweight bout ahead of us, and it's going to be between Abubakar Nurmagomedov. He's going up against Gadzi Omargadzhiev, minus 175 on Nurmagomedov and plus 150 on Gadzi. Now, very intriguing fight here, right? I always find it funny whenever we get Russians fighting each other, especially inside the UFC, right? Like, it's not often, although both of these guys are from different sects and regions of Russia. It's still interesting to see them always get matched up. Now, both guys, actually, let's start off on the Gadzi side, who showcased a lot of solid grappling on the regional scene, usually able to get his opponents into that crucifix position, rain down big shots, and get the TKO stoppage that way. But like, his striking leaves a lot to be desired. It's all just big winging hooks, power shots, hoping that he can close that distance by either knocking his opponent down with those big shots or using that to get his opponent to kind of flinch on top, and then he can change levels, get under the hips of his opponent, and then drag them to the ground where he does his best work. But Abubakar has shown, a lot of inconsistencies with his skill set. I've seen him look horrible. I've seen him look too lackadaisical. I've seen him look amazing, like he did against Jared Gooden in his last fight, where he won the first 2 rounds probably just off of striking. He had a very crisp jab. He was very solid with his output and very consistent in sticking in the face of Gooden. And then in that third round, he went to his bread and butter of the takedowns, looking to get him to the ground and then controlling him. I believe he controlled him for the last 4 minutes of that round. So solid work from him there. So the reason I end up leaning on the Abubakar side here is because I think he has a little bit more of a complete game. Also, I think that he can contest and stop some takedowns here should Omargadzhiev look to go that route. I think that the jabbing and the better technical striking that we'll see from Abubakar will be the reason why why he's favored here and why he should end up getting his hand raised. Am I trusting him at minus 175? No. The guy's just too inconsistent. So I'd rather just sit on the outside and just see, can he put together a couple consistent performances before we go out there and trust him as a big favorite. We all remember him being too lackadaisical on the ground against David Zavada 2 fights ago and then getting choked for his troubles. And also the other part of it is the consistency in terms of getting inside the cage. He got into the UFC, I believe, November of 2019 and has only competed twice. Not a good look to me. But I do think he is the overall better fighter here. If you gave me closer to minus 120, I'd probably take the shot on him. But I do think that his superior striking will allow him to stay safe on the feet and then possibly even mix in some takedowns of his own later in this fight. I do think he has the better cardio as well. that should probably be the reason he wins this fight. So give me Nurmagomedov via decision at plus 125, and I'm more than happy with that outcome. All right, next up, another featherweight bout that we got coming up here between Zubaira Tukhugov, who's coming in as a minus 155 favorite, and Lucas Almeida, who's coming in as a plus 135 underdog. Now, Zubaira Tukhugov, another guy who I would like to see a little bit more consistently and more active inside the cage, but we just get him every now and then. And, another guy who I've seen very inconsistent performances from as well. He has a decent enough striking game where we saw him really showcase it against Ricardo Ramos, a guy that, in Ramos, was highly touted coming into the UFC. He would always be a massive favorite over his opponents, and then he ended up taking a couple L's, and now people are hopping off that Ramos train. But I think that Ramos still has a lot of potential, and that win for Tukhugov should be given the respect that it actually deserves. Tukhugov, similar to Nurmagomedov or Abubakar, I should say, very consistent jab that he can throw out there when he's on his game, good movement, and then he does a good job in terms of mixing in his takedowns, which I think is going to be the ultimate deciding factor here against Lucas Almeida. Now, Almeida, big power puncher, throws in combinations, stays consistent with his leg kicks, but I think he's going to struggle with that up-down game of Tukhugov and, dealing with that jab and then the potential of a takedown coming after that. I think that's going to be the ultimate kryptonite here for Almeida. Almeida initially looked like a live dog to me because of the power and the consistency in which he throws his combinations, but I just think that he's going to get stuck up a little bit and might even start to get too gun shy considering some of the takedown entries that we'll see from Tukhugov, and especially whether he can time them properly as well. I think that we'll see Tukhugov be very successful with that. So I'm going to lean Tukhugov here. Again, another spot where I was kind of hoping for a slightly better line, but I'm still expecting him to go out there and get that win. So I'll go Tukhugov and Tukhugov via decision, which currently sits at plus 165. I'd probably take a shot on that over the over the money line, but I expect Tukhugov to go out there and grind this fight out over 15 minutes. All right, next fight up. This is a big one in the light heavyweight division. Both guys coming off solid victories in the last outings. Volkan Oezdemir coming in as the plus 140 underdog. Nikita Krylov coming in as the minus 160 favorite. Now, Volkan Oezdemir is coming off a performance against Paul Craig where he managed to keep the fight upright for the majority of the 15 minutes, but even, did mix it up a little bit on top when Paul Craig was diving for those legs and looking for that Imanari roll and looking for a way to get the fight to the ground. And Volkan did a very good job in terms of staying patient, waiting for his openings, and then getting out of those bad positions, and then just butchering Paul Craig again on the feet. On the flip side for Nikita Krylov, on the same night, on the same card, he went out there and dispatched of Alexander Gustafsson in a different way than we've seen him fight since returning to the UFC in, I believe it was 2018. With Krylov, when he returned to the UFC, you saw him take way more of a grapple-heavy approach. And I think that was very smart of him, considering pretty much every single fight that he had before the Glover-Teixeira fight had never seen the third round, let alone seen a decision in 20-plus MMA fights. That is absolutely insane. But then he went on a stretch of 3 straight decision fights where he went 1-2, but we saw his grapple-heavy approach on full display. He sells out for the takedowns. He just, they almost look desperate at times. And I think if there's a guy that can stop those takedowns, they will likely have the advantage there by landing the better strikes on the feet, especially if they're the better technical striker. And I think that's what we're actually getting here with Volkan Oezdemir. Oezdemir showcases an 86% takedown defense rate, and he is one of the harder guys to take down because of his ability to anticipate shots from his opponents, as well as digging underhooks whenever he has getting into those positions or even up against the cage. I think Krylov is going to struggle mightily to get this fight to the ground, and he might be able to land 1 or 2 takedowns, but I do think that we've seen good get-ups from Oezdemir as well, which makes me believe he'll be able to have this fight in his range, which is the striking range, for the majority of this fight. And then from there, his consistency with the leg kick, his consistency with throwing good combinations and powerful combinations will likely get the better of Nikita Krylov. I think a knockout is on the table here, but I think that we'll see, the vast majority of this fight kind of get stuck up against the cage. And although Krylov may not be able to land takedowns and he might have a good chunk of control time, I think whenever they are back out at distance, we can trust Oezdemir to land the bigger and more effective strikes. I could also see the reckless nature of Nikita Krylov coming back and biting him in the ass here. I think that will see Volkan counter effectively, maybe even drop him a couple times. But I do like that money line price on him at plus 140 because given his takedown defense, given his superior technical striking, this is closer to a 50-50 fight than it is what the odds currently indicate. I think it's just over 60% in Krylov's favor here, and I think that's incorrect. So I like Volkan Oezdemir here. By decision is currently plus 400. By knockout is plus 300. You bet both. Hopefully you end up on the profit side regardless, but better way of taking it, and without even losing any money, hopefully, as long as he wins, is by taking that money line at plus 140, because I think that's a great line here. So give me Volkan Oezdemir via decision, plus 400. Again, I expect it to be slow paced because of the grappling attempts of Krylov, but once we get back out into space, the damage that Oezdemir should accrue should get him the nod in this fight. All right, next up, middleweight bout here between Mahmoud Muradov, who's coming in as a plus 170 underdog, and Kyle Borralho, who's coming in at minus 200. Now, it's so weird seeing Muradov as an underdog, plus 170 especially, right? We're so used to seeing him as a minus 500 favorite that we kind of just, we just automatically usually bet him at those spots. But now that he dropped the ball in his last fight against GM3, a lot of people are hopping off the train and jumping on the Borralho train now. And we can't really take that scope of what have you done for me lately, because that usually doesn't work out the greatest. But after running the tape, it seems like if you can pressure Muradov effectively, whether it's with grappling, whether it's with just pressure and staying in his face and keeping him on his back foot, you could start to drain the gas tank of Muradov and probably take over from there. Now, Muradov will absolutely be the better striker, technically speaking, in this matchup against Kyle Borralho, but I think that Borralho's karate-style stance and blitzing in and out of movement should keep him safe from the big shots of Muradov, but that should allow him to wait for that opportunity to blitz in, get a hold of Muradov, rough him up in the grind of the clinch up against the cage, and maybe even land some takedowns here where he could do some decent work from on top. Borralho, I think, has a sketchy gas tank as well, but he's shown in numerous fights that he can kick it into that extra gear when he needs to, especially in the clinch and grappling realm, which is where I think he'll have the advantage and will ultimately be able to keep this fight for the majority of 15 minutes. So minus 200, though, is not sexy enough for me to take that chalk on Borralho here, especially at the striking disadvantage he'll likely be at. And if Muradov's gas tank doesn't fail him the way that I expect it to, maybe Borralho doesn't pressure him. Maybe Borralho is just content with just letting him rest in certain spots and being competitive over 15 minutes. That's where Muradov will be live. That's where Muradov could pull off the upset. So for me, this is a fight where I'm likely just going to sit back and watch. But I do think Borralho, with his grinding style, with his backpacking style, especially if he can get the back of Muradov, he should be able to grind out precious minutes here and get some solid control time, maybe even get some damage, which will likely get him his hand raised via decision in this spot. So give me Borralho via decision. But this is a sit back and wait for me fight. Maybe even the over 2.5, if you can get a good enough number on that. That's probably the best way to go for this matchup. All right, next up, I believe this is the prelim headliner and is a high-stakes welterweight bout here. Possibly could give us our next competitor for a number one contender fight. Especially, I believe there's a logjam at welterweight now because of Leon Edwards beating Kamaru Usman the way that he did. But Belal Muhammad coming in as a plus 125 underdog, going up against rising prospect Sean Brady, who's coming in at minus 145. Now, this is a very intriguing matchup between two guys who prefer to grapple to get their success, right? Belal Muhammad has recently been taking a page from the Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman playbook by just using cardio, movement, and wrestling to get his hand raised in the majority of his matchups. Against Vicente Luque, we saw it on full display. He used his movement to kind of keep Vicente Luque from landing the big strikes and getting his combinations going. And then at the most opportune moments, Belal will look for that takedown, which he would likely get, and more often than not did get in that fight against Luque. And he was able to control him from on top. Luque, off his back, looked very demoralized, had nothing to give to him. No real submission attempts, no real working to get back to his feet either enough on a consistent basis. We saw it against Wonderboy Thompson. We saw it against Diego Lima. Like, we saw plenty of fights where Belal was taking that Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman style approach to get his wins. Now he's going up against a guy in Sean Brady who, I don't know if it'll work, right? I think it'll have to be Belal Muhammad landing strikes and staying consistent with his volume and his output from the outside to get his hand raised in this matchup, because Sean Brady, very difficult to take down, right? Very, very difficult. I think there's only been one guy who's been able to get him down in his 4 UFC fights to date. I think he's going to struggle to get Belal will struggle to get Sean Brady to the ground here. And then on the feet, Sean Brady, a lot of his striking comes from power style combinations, likes to throw big hooks and likes to throw big punches, looks to get his opponent out of there with those shots. So I think that Belal may not eat those the best either. But I am expecting this fight to get tied up in the clinch position. I think Belal is going to try to test his might to see if he can get Sean Brady to the ground. But I think that's going to be where he runs into trouble. Because Sean Brady does a great job in terms of transitioning from takedowns to getting the back of his opponents and then tripping them and then just holding on to them. He was able to do it against a high-level grappler and a high-level BJJ player like Michael Chiesa. And I think that Sean Brady can do the exact same thing here to Belal Muhammad. My concern is, I like the Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman style that Belal Muhammad is fighting with. Now I just get to see him try to do it against a grapple-heavy fighter like Sean Brady. The last time we saw Belal do this was against Damian Maia, right? He was able to stuff 21 takedowns, or strike 20 of 21 takedowns, and then on the feet he was just able to land enough strikes to get his hand raised there, because all Damian Maia was doing was just trying to get the fight to the ground, not landing any significant strikes or not enough significant strikes. But Belal will be eating damage here from Brady, and then I think that Brady, if he wants to get this fight to the ground, he might not even need to get it there. He could just get the back and just hold on to Belal and keep Matt returning him and just getting that control time there. So for me, this is a sit back and watch spot, especially for Brady, going up against a guy like a high action and a high cardio guy like Belal Muhammad. And if he can pass this test and look good doing so over 15 minutes, I'll have even more respect for the guy. So give me Sean Brady by decision, which currently sits at plus 150. But yeah, I think the strength and grappling of Brady will be too much for Belal here to get his hand raised. All right, that takes us to the main card. Quick reminder here for you guys to make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe if you have not already. That is the best way to support your boy. Please do so. Drop a comment if you so please. Let me know how shitty my picks are, if that's the approach you want to take. Or if you've been tailing me for the last several months, let me know how much money you've been making as well. So I appreciate that. And then lastly, just a quick plug for the Patreon. The best way to support your boy. Link is in the description below. $5 a month. Cancel at any time. No long-term commitments. I promise you guys will enjoy your time in there as well. All right, first fight of the night. Big step up here from Fiorot, coming in as a minus 205 favorite, going up against one of my favorite fighters to bet on, Katlyn Chookagian, who comes in at plus 175. Now, Katlyn has been cashing multiple tickets for me over the last couple years now, especially since 2019. I was able to catch a big underdog ticket on her against Cynthia Calvillo, had her as my lock of the night play against Jennifer Maia, and even against Amanda Ribas. I think I had a 2 or 3 unit play on her there as well. Very, consistent fighter. We know what we're going to get from her. We know we're going to get output, solid, crisp strikes down the middle. She's very good in terms of making her opponents react very poorly to getting hit. Just go back and watch the Amanda Ribas fight, and some people may say that it was a highly debated, controversial decision there, but I don't think Ribas did much with the control that she was able to get when she did get the fight to the ground, and anytime they were back on the feet, Chookagian was just popping her head back with like a Pez dispenser, and she looked very good doing so. She just kept bouncing that head back, and again, her striking just looking very good, and her movement just makes it so hard for opponents to kind of gauge when she's going to come in and strike, and when they can throw their own strikes without getting hit in return. Unfortunately for Chookagian, though, she's going up against a Fiorot here who kind of does the same thing that Chookagian does, but with more emphasis, with more power, and more efficiency. And I think that might be the difference maker here. I'm just not so hot on betting her at minus 200, though, because Chookagian can make fights very close. And this is my other concern here. I wouldn't be surprised to see Chookagian to try to get this fight to the ground, because she is the better jiu-jitsu player here, but we've been seeing some great things from Fiorot in terms of stopping takedowns, redirecting her opponent's momentum, and then ending up on top, which I think that is something that she can do here. But I also think that she'll end up being the stronger fighter here. So in those clinch positions, I think it will be very easy for her to get out of those bad spots against Chookagian. And then once they're back at distance, I think with her style of throwing straight shots as well, with as much power as she does, I think the judges will likely favor that more than what Chookagian is able to land here. So, question marks about the line. I do think it deserves to be slightly closer, but I think the line is relatively accurate. With everything considered and considering how they fight and how I see this fight playing out in my head, I'd love to take an underdog shot on Chookagian, but I just think that she'll be eating the worst of the shots here, and it will definitely score better on the judges' scorecards. And this will all come down to how Minot deals also with the possible grapple-heavy approach that Chookagian may be looking to take. But from what I've been seeing thus far, I have been impressed with Fiorot's game from an overall perspective. So give me Fiorot. Give me Fiorot by decision, which is -110. Much better line than her money line. Yeah, I'd kind of be surprised if she actually finishes Chookagian. Chookagian got finished by Jessica Andrade by that beautiful body shot. Fiorot has some solid power as well, but I think we'll see her land enough strikes here to get her hand raised via decision. All right, next up, big lightweight bout here between Beneil Dariush coming in as a +165 underdog, -195 the return on Mateusz Gamrot, who's been on an absolute killing streak since he dropped that split decision, which a lot of people were thinking was controversial against Guram Kutateladze in his UFC debut, but since then has not looked back, has had tremendous performances, finishing some high-level dudes, and now he is fighting the highest-level dude to date. Now, solid performance against Arman Tsarukyan in his last fight from Gamrot. Again, another highly debated decision in that matchup. But the fact that Gamrot was going takedown for takedown, scramble for scramble against a high-level fighter like Arman Tsarukyan showcases to me that he could have his own success here against Beneil Dariush, who's really been taking that grapple-heavy approach to get a lot of his wins in his recent fights, right? The Tony Ferguson fight, we saw him get takedowns without any issue and control that fight relatively easily. The Carlos Diego Ferreira fight, always managing to get the back of Ferreira and just controlling him there. There's another one recently that's escaping my mind where he was continuously able to get that control time against his opponents. Now, Beneil, over the last several years, we've been seeing a confidence improvement in terms of his striking. Like, technically speaking, it's getting better as well, but the power in which he throws his kicks and his punches just demands respect from them, and he's able to kind of intimidate them and then either put his power on them or look for the takedown and get them to the ground there. But I think that recklessness will likely play against him here against the technically better Mateusz Gamrot. Like I said, Mateusz has shown that he can grapple with the best of them. So if Dariush looks to try to get this into the grappling realm, I think we'll see Gamrot be safe in those spots. And then on the feet, I think Gamrot is a cleaner and crisper striker, and he should be able to ding up Beneil Dariush whenever he tries to just march in and blitz in with the reckless approach. So I do lean Gamrot here. Line is a little bit wide for me, right? Because even though he is technically the better fighter, in my opinion, it's just that crazy wild style of Dariush that gives me some hesitancy in terms of laying chalk against him. If this was Gamrot closer to -150, -140, I'd be a little bit more inclined in taking a small play on him there on his money line. But the spot that actually intrigues me the most is the under 2.5. Dariush always brings in that crazy style, and I think that Gamrot is that perfect matchup for him where he can probably, I think that Gamrot will have the advantage in terms of the cardio, and then I think it can take advantage of those flaws and mistakes that Dariush might end up making by being too desperate for takedowns or being too desperate with landing his power shots on the feet. So I like Gamrot here to put together a much better plan altogether, and I also think that he can end up finding the finish himself, whether it's a club and sub or whether it's just a club and drum. I think he'll be able to catch Dariush eventually and finish the fight after that. So the under 2.5 at +160, which is the last line I saw that, has my intrigue, but even Gamrot inside the distance at +250, I think is a great line as well. But I'm thinking Gamrot, maybe Gamrot by KO. I think I saw that +500. But the under will more than likely be my play here. Just a 1-unit shot, hoping for violence and hoping that we get that madman Dariush style that we've become so accustomed to. So give me Gamrot inside the distance. Let's go. All right. Business continues to pick up as we take on a bantamweight fight here between Petrosyan coming in as a minus 275 favorite and Sean O'Malley, who's at plus 230. Very intriguing to see Jan's line continue to drop here and that confidence on the O'Malley side continue to grow from a lot of the betting community. But I understand it, right? You guys have been watching me for a while. You guys know that I think that Petrosyan has a very slow starting style where he can get behind, but he needs those extra main event rounds or those championship rounds to get back ahead and either finish his opponents or really start to pick it up later and demoralize and just wreck his opponents later in his fights, which is what he normally does. Sean O'Malley, he'll have the range here. He likely can stay busy enough from the outside with his kicks and his striking, which could get him up on output, which could get him up on numbers, which could make him very competitive in this fight. My concern here, though, is if you're looking to take the Sean O'Malley side, is what if Petrosyan just says, fuck it, let's take this fight to the ground. That's where Sean has shown the vast majority of his weaknesses. Why don't we, as the Russian, the guy who has shown solid wrestling in his past fights and previous fights, maybe not so much in the UFC, but definitely on the regional scene, why not take the wrestling approach? Get this fight to the ground. You have it in your favor right off the jump. You know you have the wrestling advantage. You know you have the grappling advantage. Let's use that right off the jump. That's what I'm hoping to see here from Petrosyan. And if this line continues to drop and you give me minus 250 even on Petrosyan, minus 220, I will likely pull the straight up trigger on him there. Because like minus 300 to minus 400, then you start to be like, okay, we know that he relies a little bit too much on his striking at times. And if he can't get a knockdown or if he can't land enough, Chookagian could possibly make an argument that he deserves to win 2 out of the 3 rounds. But I think that at minus 250, minus 225, I don't mind taking that shot. Because of the potential wrestling upside of that as well. And again, people are going to be, most casuals and laymen's might be like, hey, like, who cares about the number? If you think he's going to wrestle, bet him at any number. That's not how it works. That's not how I've been on this crazy run over the last 6-7 months. It doesn't work like that. I've been honing in on possible outcomes. A fight can play out many different ways, but I'm hoping it plays out the way that I think, especially if we get better odds on it. So I'm still going to go Petrosyan. I'm going to go Petrosyan by decision at minus 110. I think we'll see O'Malley stay in this fight long enough. Maybe we get a slow pace first round, but in the second and third rounds, we see Jan get the takedown and just do good enough work from on top that O'Malley can stay in the fight, but Jan is still dominating that fight throughout. So give me Jan via decision minus 110. But I'll be keeping my eye on that line because I know there are a lot of people that are taking that underdog shot on Sean O'Malley, and I'm completely okay with it. I completely understand the approach. I just don't think it's going to end up working out for them. Next fight up, big one here in the bantamweight division because it is for the title. We got champion Aljamain Sterling coming in as a minus 175 favorite, going up against the bantamweight or former bantamweight king, TJ Dillashaw, who's coming in as a plus 150 underdog. Now, stylistically speaking, this is a very intriguing fight, right? Aljamain Sterling picked up his first legitimate win over Petrosyan last time around as he was able to mix it up and get into the grappling realm, get the back of Petrosyan and just grind out that fight. Aljamain Sterling is one of the best backpacks in the game in terms of getting that position and keeping it. On the feet, still leaves a lot to be desired, right? A lot of kicks, a lot of range-seeking strikes, a lot of big power so that I can close that distance and then get that grappling going. But if he can't get that grappling going, I think that's where TJ can really start to take over and be very competitive in this matchup. TJ has a solid wrestling background, and we've seen his wrestling game work pretty well for him, even on a bum knee like he had against Corey Sandhagen in his last fight. I think that Dillashaw will likely be the better striker here, and I think that his takedown defense can be good enough that he should be able to keep this fight on the feet, and then from there he should be able to touch up Aljamain Sterling. I wouldn't even count on a potential knockout victory for TJ Dillashaw if he can just counter perfectly here and time the entry of Aljamain Sterling correctly as well. I am expecting to see TJ Dillashaw with his fuller facilities about him. He's 35 years old, so he's definitely getting up there in age, but I still think he has enough in him to give us a peak performance that is required to beat a guy like Aljamain Sterling. So I love the underdog price here on the snake, TJ Dillashaw. I think that he has the perfect stylistic approach here to deal with Aljamain Sterling. Petrosyan, great wrestling as well, but he still managed to get tied up in certain spots. But Petrosyan minus 300, minus 400 favorite that night. We're getting underdog odds now on a guy that I feel like can contest in the grappling realm and not allow Aljamain Sterling to rack up 3 rounds of control time by just controlling him on the mat. I think Dillashaw will be too hard to catch for Sterling. I think the movement of Dillashaw will allow him to keep pivoting and make it difficult for Sterling to get in on the hips or even get the back of Dillashaw. And then obviously the striking, I'm giving the advantage to Dillashaw as well. So I think we get hand new this weekend in the co-main event. And I think we'll see TJ Dillashaw get his hand raised via decision, plus 300 on the decision line. But like I said, I'm not counting out a potential knockout either, which currently sits at plus 500. I would rather just take the money line to cover both outcomes, but I still do think that we'll see Dillashaw get his hand raised and take that strap on home with him. There you guys go. All right, main event time and the last opportunity for me to remind you guys, hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit up the Patreon as well if you want to support your boy even more. Not to mention, hit that notification bell on YouTube because I'm dropping a good chunk of content for you guys this week. So make sure you guys tune in for every single one of those and hit the like for every single one of those as well. It's a big fight week, so we got a lot of big content coming your way. Keep your eyes peeled for that. All right. Main event here. Charles the Bronx Oliveira coming in as a plus 160 underdog. Minus 180 the return on Islam Makhachev. Very intriguing fight here. A lot of people calling it Ferguson versus Khabib 2.0. However, I will argue that this could be even more competitive than Khabib and Tony Ferguson was likely going to end up being, right? Islam Makhachev only has 1 loss on his career, but has looked unstoppable since that fight. And Charles Oliveira, 11-fight winning streak, finishing the majority of his opponents as well. The guy has looked tremendous and unstoppable. We'll start off on the Charles Oliveira side, where we see his confidence and his striking getting much better over his last several fights, and mix that in with his deadly jiu-jitsu game. It's very difficult for his opponents to deal with it. Dustin Poirier, forced to strike with Charles Oliveira, and he just could not deal with the pressure. We see Charles Oliveira eventually get the back and choke him out. Justin Gaethje, another guy who didn't want to take that fight to the ground for obvious reasons, and then just kept, we saw him actually land a big strike against Charles Oliveira and hurt him, but Charles always manages to rally back and get the submission. He hurts Justin Gaethje very bad, gets him into a submission, eventually chokes him out in that fight. The constant narrative in Charles Oliveira fights is that he keeps getting hurt, but manages to rally back and get the win and finish himself. Happened in the Chandler fight as well when he first captured the title. Very difficult to deal with that man. But this is the big caveat that Makhachev throws into this fight, and which is why I'll ultimately be picking him in this matchup. The wrestling. The last time we've seen anybody try to wrestle with Charles Oliveira, it was Kevin Lee. And Kevin Lee held his own in the first 2 rounds. Like, it didn't look like Charles Oliveira had this dangerous, super deadly jiu-jitsu game once a heavy wrestler like Kevin Lee was on top of him. But then we know Kevin Lee, he's very flaky with his cardio. His cardio tremendously drops off after that second round. And that's where we saw Charles get that beautiful guillotine choke off a desperation takedown from Kevin Lee. But we know Makhachev has 5 rounds in him. We know he won't even need the 5 rounds. He needs to outlast Charles for maybe a round and a half, and as long as he can consistently get that takedown and get that top position, he will demoralize and break Charles Oliveira and eventually get that finish probably in the 3rd, maybe 4th round. I'd be surprised if the fight even starts the 4th round. I think that Islam will not be scared to take this fight to the ground as the last several opponents from Charles have been, and I think he'll be safe on top once he is able to get that takedown, which I know Charles will be inviting initially, but as Makhachev subdues the submission game of Charles Oliveira, and as he starts to pass guard and get into dominant position, Charles will be like, oh shit, I'm in some trouble now. Yes, Charles has the advantage in the striking, but he won't have the benefit of keeping that fight in that realm because Makhachev will be landing takedowns here. And Makhachev's striking is improving too, but I am not going to say that will be the reason he wins this fight. The reason he wins this fight is that he'll get this fight to the ground. He'll be able to stop the jiu-jitsu of Charles Oliveira, get into a dominant position, and just rain down hell and brimstone on Charles, eventually getting that finish probably in the second or third round. So no matter who wins, it's going to be Anu because it is a vacant title. But I do think that it's going to be Anu Islam Makhachev here. And I think we have entered officially the Makhachev era where he can just rule this division for years and years to come. So give me Makhachev inside the distance, -105. I love his money line as well, where it's at -180. I don't even mind the under 2.5, which is last time I checked around -160. My concern is that it might take more than 12 and a half minutes for Makhachev to break Charles and truly assert his dominant position from on top and then get him out of there. The stat, which is why I love the under 2.5 in all of Charles Oliveira fights, is that in his 30 UFC fights, 26 of them have finished inside the distance, or under 2.5, I should say. Sorry, I believe one of them finished 10 seconds after that 2.5 mark as well. So maybe let's say 27 fights finished on under 2.5 in his 30 UFC fights. So violence is definitely on the table here. I love the fight doesn't go to decision as a parlay piece around that -500 line. Throw that in with, say, Karol Rosa, and maybe you might get a solid bet there. But I love Makhachev here. I think the steam and the popularity of Charles Oliveira is the reason why this line is as close as it is. And don't get me wrong, he's looked tremendous. But people fail to realize that he has not gone up against a wrestling threat in his last couple fights. I guess you can say Michael Chandler was a wrestling threat, but we know Michael Chandler just likes to go out there and throw bungalows as well. But he has not fought anybody like Makhachev since Kevin Lee, and Makhachev is much better than Kevin Lee with much better cardio as well. So give me Islam inside the distance, and let's go. There you guys go. The entire UFC 280 card broken down for you guys. Just a reminder, hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit up the Patreon as well, $5 a month. You can see all my picks first. You guys can see the Discord community, which is amazing as well. A lot of great things on there. Best bets and props article too. It's not just to see my picks, but it's also to support your boy, to continue to do this thing on a full-time basis. Content creation is a lot of work, and a lot of research goes into it as well. So that $5 a month means a lot to your boy so that I can continue doing this and dropping quality breakdowns for you guys as well. All right, that is a wrap on the episode. Appreciate everybody once again. Good luck on your bets this week, and I hope to see you guys at all the live streams and all the content that I'll be dropping throughout the week as well. Good luck and peace out.